Great. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. My name is Sarah Moran. I'll be the host for this presentation. We have today Dr. Louise Bodack and Dr. Melissa Weinsz with their presentation on Collabor-Action, working across campus partners to support first-generation international and graduate transfer student athletes. So I just want to let you all know that if you wish to activate the live captioning, you can select live transcript and then select show subtitle, and that will activate that closed captioning on your screen. And so at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Bodack and Dr. Weinsz.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. It's a wonderful Friday afternoon. So glad you have decided to join us on this Friday afternoon. So as Sarah had mentioned, I'm Dr. Bodack. I'm Director of Student Affairs in the Cox Communications Academic Center for Student Athletes. So welcome, everybody. Dr. Weinsz.
Hey everyone, I am Dr. Melissa Weinsz, and I am the Director of Student Athlete Professional Development, which is housed in Tiger Life and Athletics. So we've had a little bit of collaboration between Dr. Bodack and myself with athletics and academics. So we're excited to talk to y'all today.
And just sort of an interesting sort of tidbit of information. So the Academic Center falls under the purview of academic affairs here at LSU. We do not fall directly underneath athletics, whereas Tiger Life falls directly underneath athletics. So kind of a collaboration in action on this Friday afternoon. So what we're gonna do today is on this Friday afternoon is we're gonna go on a journey together. And we welcome you to join us on this journey. And if we kind of look at the picture that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a path. The path is not a straight line. And then this path is eventually going into the mountains. And if we kind of think about college athletics over the last year, it hasn't been a straight road or a straight path. There have been some curves, there have been some bumps, maybe even some mountains. We don't know what we're going to find on the other side. And we don't know how it's going to change come tomorrow, 6 months, or a year. So if we look at the last year, we've faced NIL, the transfer portal. Maybe what's coming down the pipeline is college athletes being employees of the universities for certain sports. How's this going to look in a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? If we look at the different student populations that we serve, there are a lot of different groups that we're serving. So what are we going to do on today's journey? Well, we're going to start out with some fun facts. Then we're going to look at sort of a committee that was formed, kind of go through like what the development looked like, members, names, purpose. And you might be thinking, well, why is that going to be important? Well, we're going to tell you on this journey why that was important. Share some demographics with you, and then talk more about some Collabor-Action. And last but not least, some current and future programming. And during this journey, we are going to ask for some input. So hopefully the questions we ask are not going to be too thought-provoking, recognizing it is a Friday afternoon. Probably for some of you, it's closer to 5 o'clock than not. So we hope you enjoy this journey. Okay, Dr. Weinsz.
All right, so we're gonna open with some fun facts. So we're gonna see how much the audience knows about first-gen, international, and grad transfer student athletes. So I see that nobody has their cameras on, and that is okay, but we're still gonna ask for some interaction with y'all if that's all right with you. So there is the reactions button that we could use. So if you could give me a thumbs up if you think that a fact is true, that would be great. So we're kind of going to gauge the audience. So go ahead, Dr. B, you can go to the next slide.
Okay. And we're going to ease into this here. We're going to go with some true false questions first.
All right, so first one we have is true or false, first generation students are less likely to graduate on time. If we believe it's true, give me a thumbs up reaction. I'm looking at the audience on Zoom. All right, I see a couple thumbs up, and I see a no. Okay, all right, so it's actually true. So first generation students are more than twice as likely, which is 33%, to leave school within 3 years than students whose parents have a bachelor's degree. And only 48% of first gen students are actually on track to graduate within 3 years of enrollment at a 4-year institution. All right, so we did okay with this one. We're going to move on to international student athletes next. All right, so true or false, 1.1 million international students, which is an increase from last year, were enrolled in the U.S. institutions during 2020 through 2021 school year. Is this true or false? Okay, I see a thumbs up from Gabriel. What else? All right, Kylie, give me a thumbs up, thumbs up all around. Sarah's even getting in there, thumbs up. Okay, Dr. B, let's hit him with it. What is it?
Okay.
We tricked y'all on this one. It is actually false. So we stated that it was an increase from last year when in reality it's actually a major decrease of 20,000 plus student or international students in comparison to the year before. So when we think about this, we have to take into consideration the rising cost of U.S. higher education, higher numbers of student visa delays and denials, challenging political environments, COVID-19, and expanded opportunities to study in other countries outside the United States. So we tricked y'all on that one. But last but not least, we got one more population of student athletes to talk about. All right, true or false? Transfer students graduate at a lower rate nationwide than students who start as freshmen at a 4-year institution. What do we think? No, we got some no's.
It looks like we got some thinking going on too.
Lauren with a thumbs up. See a thumbs down. Okay, Liz, I see you.
All right.
All right, let's reveal it, Dr. B. What do they say?
I feel like it should be playing Jeopardy music here.
Yeah. All right, so it's actually false. So we said they graduate at a lower rate nationwide when that is not the case. So transfer students actually graduate at a higher rate nationwide than students who start as a freshman at a 4-year school. Great job, everyone. We're gonna learn a lot today in the session.
And if we think back to our school days, we all remember how much we love true and false questions on exams.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Okay. All right, so now kind of we set the stage a little bit. So what is this committee gonna look like? How did this committee come about that is gonna be looking at first generation, international, and graduate transfer students? So in not even a year ago, early summer of 2021, the idea was proposed. I was approached and I was told I was going to lead a committee dealing with first generation student athletes. I had a lot of questions to which there were no answers other than be patient. So maybe some of you can relate to this in your jobs. So I was, still persistent, trying to find out more as to what was going on. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm like, hey, guess what? Not only is your committee going to be looking at first generation student athletes, you're also going to be looking at international student athletes as well. Again, great. Who's on my committee? What are we going to be doing? Just be patient, be patient. Okay, I'm trying to be patient, trying to get answers. More time elapses and now, now you're going to have some graduate transfer student athletes that we want you to look at as well. So we went from looking at one subpopulation to 3 different subpopulations. It was announced in late August that this committee was being formed and these are the groups we're going to look at, and still I was the only committee member. And then our committee met in late September of 2021. So this is where we kind of like you to maybe chime in and use the chat for this. We're gonna come back to this in several slides. But if you were tasked with dealing or chairing a committee or serving on a committee that was dealing with first generation, international, and graduate transfer student athletes, what questions are kind of popping into your mind now? Again, please use the chat. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. Those are the best type of questions. Exams aren't written that way, but we're not having an exam. So chime in, tell us, share with us what you're thinking. Okay, I see we have a couple of people chime in. So kind of keep that, you know, in the back of your mind. If something pops into your mind, feel free to go and write it in the chat. As I said, we're going to come back to that. Okay, so in terms of knowing the subpopulations that we were going to serve, now came the part of who's going to be on the committee. So basically we were looking, so in our office, we have advisors, we have learning specialists. So we wanted an advisor or learning specialist who worked with a team or individuals that were first generation students, as well as somebody, advisor or learning specialist who worked with international student athlete populations. We do have a couple of teams that tend to have a high percentage of international student athletes. An advisor or learning specialist that also worked with graduate transfer student athletes. So that's kind of how we initially formed the committee. We were looking maybe to start out with 3 members. And then kind of going back to our question of kind of questions that came into mind. I see we have some great ideas in the chat, kind of somewhere maybe in line with what we were thinking of. So looking at first generation student athletes, well, who are these students? Are most of them male? First generation students, are most of them on one team, or are they spread across multiple teams? What are the countries of our student athletes? We actually had an idea of how many international student athletes we had, but now if you were to ask us the countries, probably a lot of us could not have named the countries. What country is home to our largest international student athlete population? What is the total number of graduate transfer student athletes? So these are some of the first questions that came to mind. And then some of the questions that are popping up in the chat are also questions that came to mind that we were looking to address. So thank you for sharing those ideas in terms of looking at their motivation, what are campus resources to support their transition, how can we assist them? Now we have cultural differences, how do we deal with that? Again, will somebody from the graduate school be on the committee? Retention is a big thing, so great questions. Okay, Dr. Weinsz.
So these are the different committee members that are part of our small group. So Dr. Bodack is on the first generation and graduate transfer committee. I'm on the international committee. Jason Shaw is on the graduate transfer committee. Kirsten Peterman is on international. Annalise is on first generation, and Fernanda is also international. And something kind of fun and exciting to note is 2 of our committee members are also international student athletes themselves. So not only have they experienced it, but they're now in the position to help support and help those student athletes that are in that experience as well. And something else that our committee has also experienced is we've had turnover in staff that were on the committee, which has made it kind of interesting to get our bearings. So constantly a developmental process from start to finish.
So we've had a lot going along, a lot that we're trying to juggle, but we continue to march forward. Again, that mountain that's been in our way, we're trying to find a way to go around it if we can't dig a hole through it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I said small group earlier. We really struggled at first to figure out exactly what we wanted our committee to be named. And the committee was created and met for the first time without a name. And originally, FIGHT was the acronym that we were using. So F was first generation, I was international, G was grad transfer, H was help. We wanted to help them find study resources, utilize campus resources, and T was try. So really try to, gear themselves towards this academic success, reach professional development. But FIGHT sounded a little bit too much like Fight Club, so we thought, okay, we might need to rebrand. So we decided to utilize the name Dr. B. Figs, just kidding, but not really. Just for the purpose of this presentation, we put a picture of a fig on our slide. But the 3 populations that we're focusing on, if we haven't said it enough already, is that there was a specific need at LSU to really support first-generation student athletes. And as Dr. B said, that was the foundation and reason for the start of our committee. So just in general at LSU, 44% of our student population is first-gen, which is astoundingly large. And then we also really wanted to ensure attrition. So how can we get them to not only stick around and stay all 4 years, but actually enjoy and get the most out of their experience? And it has been noticed by not only us, but also other campus entities that there's a lack of mentorship and support. So we're starting to build out those structures. And then international, we've noticed from our interactions with those students, particularly in our student support offices, that there are language barriers that they're experiencing in classes when it comes to understanding assignments, communicating with professors, and even just having conversations with their teammates and coaches. There's a struggle. And then culture shock, which I think was mentioned previously, or cultural differences. Lauren mentioned that in the chat, which is awesome, Lauren. Thanks for bringing that to our attention as well, is that it is a lot to navigate. And then also in regard to taxes and making sure that we have the correct financial literacy, that is a problem as well. And then with grad transfers, are they able to utilize their degree path from the previous institution and continue onward with a purposeful graduate degree? And then do they know physically where are campus resources? What is available to them? How do they know how to navigate the space? And are they experiencing a sense of community?
All right.
So this really led us to help establish what we wanted the charge of our committee to be. And there are a bunch of questions in the chat that align very nicely with what we were questioning and concerned with as well. So we really wanted to establish a shared definition and collective awareness of what first generation meant and what those student athletes were experiencing. And we wanted to make sure that there is a community and belonging, not only within all three groups, but amongst all three groups. And we thought that establishing different resource guides and really utilizing digital signage in our social media could kind of help bridge and create that sense of connectivity. And we've really utilized really advisors and learning specialists within our building to help us navigate the different issues of just different issues and concerns that student athletes are experiencing. And we're also hoping to establish or build onto a mentorship program that is already here on campus, and or create a buddy system between student athletes, between staff, and between different athletic administration as well. And then hopefully at some point down the road, creating an International Student Athlete Leadership Council. So something that is very similar to SAC, or the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, where it can be a space for international student athletes on campus to really become leaders and utilize their voice.
And then one other thing I'll say that I'll add to this is some of our campus partners, so International Student Office has undergone a major overhaul with a new director, a lot of new staff members, and it's been very easy to connect with them. They are eager to establish relationships with our office. So that has made this transition or having this committee in place a lot easier. And I'm also going to deviate from our script a little bit. I want to give a shout out to one of our fight committee members who's on this call, and that's Kirsten. So welcome, Kirsten. She's also an international student athlete, was a gymnast from Canada. So we welcome her on this call and her input. Okay, now numbers. A lot of times people don't like speaking numbers. Let's look at demographics. So what are we talking about? Okay, so first generation, I apologize. Apparently I did not pull up the most recent version of our talk, but that's okay. So rather than notes for first generation, that should be that we had more males than females were our first generation student athletes. I apologize for not having the actual numbers for you, but I had inadvertently deleted the file that had all the numbers and was unable to get a copy of that file before today. So my apologies on that. So hopefully by the time we send out the recordings, we'll be able to kind of update that in there. Graduate transfer student population, going back to kind of 2018, kind of looking at the last 4 years, basically going from, hovering around 1 or 2 graduate student athletes, and then bam, we come into this year, and now all of a sudden we jump up to 10. So we're just looking in this case at the graduate transfers. We're not looking at the students that were here as undergrad that are continuing their degrees as graduate students. They might be a population that we add into looking at for support, but for right now, we're kind of focusing on some of the graduate transfers. And then in terms of our international student athletes, so we have a fair number of countries that are representative. By far, our highest number come from the United Kingdom. And then we have a bunch of students from countries where there are only 1 or 2 representatives from that country. So our top 5, and this is something to keep in mind, United Kingdom, Mexico, Sweden, Spain, and Norway. Okay, now when we kind of got the data and we were looking at the data, there were kind of some surprises that we had. So the one thing I don't think that, at least on our end, that anybody was anticipating or expecting to see is that we had first generation students that are also international student athletes. We actually have a fair number of those. I don't know for our audience if that's something that surprises you. Perhaps looking back on it, it shouldn't have surprised us, but at the time it did, kind of like that immediate reaction. And just about all sports contained at least one student athlete that was first generation. For our large teams, such as football or something, which had a high number, but again, one person on a large number team is not going to matter. But for some of our smaller teams, you might have 2 student athletes, and that's maybe a high percentage of your team. And then that graduate transfer student trend that we saw the jump from 2 to 10. Is that something that is an anomaly? Are we going to continue to see this? Is this only what we're seeing because of the COVID waivers? Is it what we're seeing because of the transfer portal? Again, think back to that picture at the beginning of the slide. I don't know where we're going to go. Are we on a little winding path? Are there going to be little hills in front of us? Or are there going to be mountains that we're going to have to overcome? So we have lots of questions. Maybe not. Maybe for some, we still don't have the answers. Okay. Is this you, Dr. Weinsz, or is this me?
It's you, Dr. Bodack.
Okay. So in terms of when our committee met, kind of thinking back to that first meeting when I prepared the agenda for that meeting, it kind of seemed very lofty, maybe even somewhat intimidating to some of the committee members, just kind of like, we have these 3 student populations, had a lot of data that was being shared. So again, you throw somebody a spreadsheet at them, kind of eyes glaze over, deer in the headlight look. And now we got to try to make sense of all of this. But some of what we knew going into this, and some of this was coming from advisors who were working with our, maybe some of our teams that were working heavily, high enrollment of international student athletes. So at LSU, are 2 teams that really do have a large percentage of international student athletes, men's and women's swimming and diving, and men's and women's track. We're also starting to see maybe some of our golf and tennises, more of an international student athlete population appearing there. And some of this is perhaps due to coaching changeovers, new coaches coming in, recruiting differently. But some of what we knew kind of when the committee was in place is there are nutrition concerns. So there could be dietary restrictions. Is dining services offering the food options? Are there any religious exemptions or certain foods students can't eat because of a religion, or maybe certain holidays that they are restricted in terms of what they can or can't eat? For our international student athletes, paperwork, if they want to travel home, what paperwork is needed? How do they go about getting a driver's license and car insurance? Policies and procedures, whether it be at the university, maybe something in the dorms, maybe something around Baton Rouge. A lot of our international student athletes had never visited campus or even been in the US for that matter prior to the start of the semester. For our first generation students, there's an issue of navigating financial aid and FAFSA forms. Parents and guardians weren't understanding them. And then there's always kind of the elephant in the room, the academic integrity and plagiarism issues, particularly for our international student athletes. Okay, Dr. Weinsz.
So now we're going to get to the good stuff. We've talked about the formation of the committee, how it all came about, and what we're specifically experiencing at LSU. So Dr. B, as leading this charge, really reiterated to all of us that we have so many incredible resources on campus. And we need to collaborate with them, but also move forward and produce and create product for our student athletes that need our assistance. So that's why we blended the idea of collaborating and actually moving forward in action together as a committee in this process, as the FIG committee.
And it's Dr. Weinsz who I give credit to her for coming up with this term. I thought it was great when I heard it. Wish I had came up with it.
Oh, thanks, Dr. B.
Okay, so it's kind of ironic when you think a lot of times when we talk to our student athletes, like, let's not, got to worry about plagiarism. We don't want to steal ideas. But then when we kind of make it to the real world, you know what? We don't need to come up with ideas on our own. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a lot where we can reach out, make connections, form relationships. So these are some of the offices that we initially collaborated with. In some cases it was, hey, we need this data from you, registrar's office. That's where we were getting data from first generation students. In some cases, it was not always necessarily easy to get the data. There had to be a justification provided as to why we needed this data, how we were going to use it, what we were going to use it for, and the request had to come in from our director. Senior women's administrator, we were able to, the SWA, we were able to get the graduate student and international student athlete information from her. We've collaborated with the International Cultural Center, Athletic Dining Services, looking to work with student support services. And last but not least, kind of what webinars are out there or that are free that we could partake and listen and gain more insight into these various populations.
So these are some specific examples of what we have found on campus thus far that could be a great bridge or kind of like net of making sure that any of these populations do not fall through the cracks. So we've been very intentional about reaching out to and collaborating with these organizations, or if we haven't yet, we hope to very soon in the future. So for example, our Olin Career Center has an actual first-gen career mentor program that they've created, they've launched it, and it is successful and it's moving forward. And they talk about different topics like leadership, financial literacy, networking, and really professional expectations that first-gen students can experience once they're done with their collegiate education. And then student support services, as Dr. B mentioned, they're great at really supporting and enabling low-income first-gen and students that do have a disability and helps them stay in college all 4 years to earn their baccalaureate degrees. And then the International Cultural Center has been our main point of contact thus far, particularly with the international student athletes. But they have a lot of different social events, and they also have a bunch of educational material and sessions that have been great in bridging a lot of gaps, not only for student athletes, but also for us as a committee. And we also have the International Hospitality Foundation that really helps LSU student athletes network within the Baton Rouge community, share culture, and really celebrate and get to know each other in social groups.
Okay, so if we look at our current and future programming, where are we headed? Where are we heading? And some of these came about just from having conversations with students, just throwing ideas around a table. So regarding concerning first generation students, found out that some students who are first generation don't really understand what it means to be first generation student. So kind of educating those students about, what it means. Recognizing National First Generation College Celebration Day, which is on November 8th. This year we weren't able to do anything around that, but we hope to do something this coming fall. Inviting these campus partners to our meetings, going to visit them in their offices, having conversations with them. And then sort of what are some of the things that we've done? So Taste of Home. So this was probably one of our first initiatives that occurred in the fall. And this is kind of where we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We were just kind of like sitting around, kind of found out, ooh, it's International Students Week, November 15th through the 19th. I believe the 17th was International Student Day. I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could somehow celebrate our students with foods from their home country? I certainly had no idea what to even look at for menus. So I reached out to Athletic Dining Services, pitched the idea to them. And this was probably going back not even a month before November 15th. Asked them, we have this idea of, this is the week that's happening. We have International Student Week. Would we be able to do something where we could highlight foods from countries of our international student athletes? They came back at me with, hey, okay, that's great. What are you, how are you envisioning this event? And it was like, well, International Student Athlete is on this day. Can we have multiple foods on that day? If possible, can we maybe do something each day, highlight a food each day from a country? So they were great. They looked into this. One of the big things going back to the fall that they were really concerned about was supply chain issues. Would we be able to pull this off and get the foods and supplies needed for having this? And I was kind of pleased as punch, tickled pink when I got an email from them saying we're going to celebrate a country each day, not only for lunch, but for dinner as well. And there were going to be different options. And this was open to all student athletes and athletic staff. It was a huge hit. Each day they completely sold out of the lunch options and the dinner options. So we were great to have excited about that. Do you want to talk about the other two events?
Yes, so we worked very hard as a committee to try to collect as many different international holidays as we could to create a calendar for all staff in our academic sports center so that they could not only be aware of the holidays but know what the holidays were and what they meant, so that hopefully they could have a conversation with student athletes about what holiday they were experiencing and build that connection and bridge together even further. And then also the International Cultural Center has different tax prep information. So they provided different flyers and educational sessions for us to advertise, and we made sure that we alerted staff in our building to make sure that we posted notifications on digital signage, have those pamphlets in our office in case student athletes do come to us with those questions. We have immediate resources available and ready for them at all times.
So then some questions and more questions for you. And again, feel free to post in the chat. And actually, I was presented with one of these questions in a webinar. What does your athletic department do to welcome international student athletes? I can honestly say when I sat through that webinar and that question was asked, I was like, I have no idea. Started asking other people in my office, hey, do you know what athletics does? None of us knew what they did. So that then prompted a conversation with the athletics department. And then additionally, kind of what support is provided for international students during global events and or conflicts. So feel free to chime into the chat, even if it's like, I have no idea. We're amongst friends here. And if you're wondering what LSU does to welcome student athletes, currently it's nothing. So our committee is hoping to change that come this fall. And this is actually the menu that Athletic Dining Services prepared for the Taste of Home Week. So what they did, when I told you to kind of remember those top 5 countries that are most represented by our student athletes, those were the countries they selected to have foods prepared from them. I must admit I had to Google some of these dishes because I had no idea what they were, but they were all great. So, and again, I apologize if I'm making you hungry. I know it's close to 5 o'clock, if not later, so that was not my intent, but And I see we have a question from Tiffany. Great question. Actually, no, they were not. We did not survey our international student athletes for International Week just because of the time frame we were under. That is something that we are looking to change in the future. The feedback from this event, this was like super well received. Athletics nutrition does try to do throughout the year is they do try to pick different foods to highlight. It may not always be international. One year they actually invited a student's, I forget if it was mother or dad, to come in because he raved about, I don't know if it was the ribs or something, some barbecue. He came in, kind of supervised the nutrition staff preparing the dish. They've done like a Southern Louisiana food night. They've picked foods from different parts of different regions of the US. All those events are usually extremely well received by student athletes. But going forth, we do plan on surveying our students.
All right, last but not least, we've talked about first gen international, but the grad transfer students, and they seem to have been the forgotten population, or that's how they felt that they're received at LSU. So we got some feedback from student athletes that shared, it's almost like staff assumed that they were aware because they already had their college degree. But we found that they might potentially need something along the lines of an orientation or an additional resource. So how are they physically navigating campus? Where is the dining hall? Where is the training room? Where are these resources that they need? Something that we need to be aware of too is, are they living alone? Are they having anyone to help them or help support them throughout this transition process? And they also need to know where to locate a plethora of different resources with advisors, learning specialists, mental health, nutrition, athletic training, all of the above. They need those additional resources.
And then also keeping in mind is, and for any of these populations, are these students arriving in the summer or the fall when there's maybe a larger percentage of student athletes arriving, or are they coming in mid-year? So the past couple of years, we've had several graduate transfer students arrive mid-year. And it was actually by having a completely other conversation with them that we found out, like, well, yeah, I started last January. And you know what? I was living off campus. I was living alone. I really didn't know any of my teammates that well. So we do plan on having further conversations with this population to get some additional feedback from them. Right. Dr. Weinsz, this is you or me?
This is you, Dr. B.
Okay, so kind of to, we've been on this journey, we've been on this path. What can we sum up with the Collabor-Action that athletics and the Cox Center have? Again, one thing I've heard from the many, or not many, but the several sessions I've sat through today is listen. You need good listening skills. Be a good communicator. What are the questions to ask? Who should you be asking these questions of? Whether it's of the student athletes, whether it's campus resources. Reaching out, don't be bashful. Reach out to people. One thing we're great at in this building, we're not experts in everything. So we're gonna reach out to people who have more knowledge and can guide us and help us out. Soliciting feedback from the student athletes and coaches. Again, hearing people's stories. What is their firsthand experience? Getting the support of administration, student leadership groups. We have SAC, Student Athlete Advisory Council, and BSAA, Black Student Athlete Association. Kind of reaching out at conferences and other institutions. Hey, what are you doing? Asking questions, make those connections, reaching out. Celebrating all these different populations and subcultures. So we started with International Food Week. And then what are the mentoring opportunities? It could be student-student, peer-to-peer. It could be student to staff, student to alumni, sort of what are the opportunities that can present themselves or that we can help create. And then I see we got some more stuff in the chat here. Yes, there's agreement with that grad student population being forgotten group. And yeah, we are looking to implement orientations for these different populations, fall, spring, and summer. This actually was the first year for our mid-year population. We actually had international student athletes. We had 6 different countries represented this January. Okay, Dr. Weinsz.
All right. So now we have some questions for y'all. So does anyone happen to know what the statistics are at their particular institution for any of these populations? I'm watching the chat.
And again, we're trying not to ask too hard questions on a Friday afternoon.
If not, that's okay. That's okay.
It may, if you don't want to put it in chat, maybe think about it. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So how about support programming? Does anyone have support programming in place at their institution? And if so, why or why not? We saw a definite need for it here at LSU, and we didn't have it, but now we're hoping to. Okay. So how about specific resources and different campus entities that y'all have around you? Are there any that we didn't mention in our previous list that y'all might think would be a good addition? Like what's potentially missing on our end? And then something to consider, disability services. Tiffany coming through with all the good stuff today. That's great. Dr. B, take a note.
Yes. So actually, we do have a very strong relationship with disability services. That's probably, I started here in 2013. That was probably one of the first groups that I reached out to. And they know us by name here. They're always in our building. We're bringing them over for meetings. We're over in their building. We have a great Office of Disability Services on campus, very well run. Let's see, do we partner with international student organizations? Not yet. That's something that we're looking to change in the future. Again, we had a long list of things that we're looking to do, just slowly kind of working through that, making the connections. We do have sports psychology and counseling. So students, all teams are looking at that or meeting or have an assigned counselor for their team. We have CCACSA. CCACSA, I think, is under our Student Support Services office. So we haven't met with them yet. That's the next group we'll be reaching out to. And then International Employment Services, we have not reached out to them.
Great additions. All right, so when we're thinking about the different, variations within cultural norms, how can that influence transitional success for student athletes when they're coming into college? Like, what are the specific barriers that they're going to face? Jenna, we do not have one yet, but we hope to have one. And some student athletes, so Jenna asked if we specifically have an international student athlete group in the athletic department. We don't, but we have student athletes and coaches that have all expressed interest in creating one. So we hope to get that off the ground sometime soon. So Jenna, please check back with us at a later date. Yes, Tiffany. Perfect.
Next slide. Did we go through the slide?
Yep, next slide, Dr. B.
Okay, so last but not least, we want to thank you for your time and attention and your contributions to the chat. Whether you were chatting stuff in there or just actively listening, we really appreciate that. Feel free to reach out to either one of us regarding questions that you have, ideas. We really had some really good momentum going with our committee, and then we kind of hit a slow patch as we had to deal with some transition in the office with switching to search committees. Some of our committee members were lost, and now we're kind of back up to full staff in this committee. So we're excited to get going. And then just, thank yous to the Student Support Summit for allowing us to present today. Cox Communications Academic Center for Student Athletes, Walt Holliday, he's the executive director of our center, our FIG committee, and all of the campus partners that we've named. And most importantly, let's see, questions. This is second most important. Okay, if you would please take a couple of minutes to complete a session evaluation. You could scan the QR code that says session evaluation, and there's also a QR code for the conference evaluation. So thank you everybody for your attention, your time, for, I know I've seen a lot of your names in other sessions today, so I appreciate you attending the conference and hope you were able to be inspired by what you heard.
Thank you, everyone.